Good morning. Welcome back to Shout. I'm your host, Keith Jackson. We're going to deal with the book of Nehemiah today, once again with Pastor Ray Sr. and Pastor Ray Mabion II. A couple of months ago, Pastor Ray, we dealt with Nehemiah, some of the areas that you felt the Lord strongly leading you in building back up the walls.
Right.
Let me ask you about the call.
Yeah, Brother Keith, one of the things as we were dealing with Nehemiah that I thought was very significant, as you know, it's actually the rebuilding of the walls. And within the framework of rebuilding that wall, you have certain areas that I believe that are related to ministry. Okay. And of course, you just mentioned the call. What had happened, the call is designed to bring forth the passion that God has placed within you. For instance, Nehemiah had a concern about the people who were left in Jerusalem. And he asked his brother when he came over, he said, how are the people in Jerusalem? Mm-hmm. And because of his passion, it caused him to pray. It caused him to seek the face of the Lord. It caused him to mourn. It caused him to cry. When you deal with a call, it's something that you just don't put on the shelf. It's something that God has uniquely given you so that you might be able to express what God has placed in you. Amen. And so before you can do anything, you must know, and others around you must know, that you've been called. Okay. They knew Nehemiah had been called for that area. Nobody else was crying. Nobody else was mourning. Nobody else at that particular time was praying. Mm-hmm.
So that was a burden.
Burden. That's exactly right. Okay. A call represents a burden. And when you begin to come forth with your burden, then you know that God has ordained that. Okay. In other words, go with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think more than anything, the blessing is that whatever God calls you to do, to walk in it. And I guess the reality is sometimes folks have an idea of what they want to do. Mm-hmm. But the key ingredient is the passion and desire that God puts within you to accomplish what he wants. It's powerful. I know that gentleman at church named Jonas that picks up trash.
You're right.
That is a powerful ministry that God gave him. Mm-hmm. It is a blessing to the house of God. Mm-hmm. It is a thing that people that touches many people's lives, Now, it's something that most folks will say, I'm not going to go do that. No. My passion and my calling is big time. But you know what? To God, that is huge. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's the heart that matters. Mm-hmm. The passion and desire to be a servant in the house of God. I know it's interesting when I first started, when I came back from out of school, and one of the first things Dad had me start doing was cleaning the church. And I developed a love for the house. There's no way I could have understood the love I would have developed for the house of God by cleaning the toilets and vacuuming. But man, it's like I cared.
Right.
It made me see things in a different light. Right. And it gave me a servant's heart for the house of God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So many people, we think that when we're called to do something that we're supposed to be on top, but it's usually, like you said, that servant's heart, because Christ was a servant first. He could have flexed his muscle, so to speak, and told everybody to do this, do that, but he lived an exemplary life first, to let them see what they should be.
Yeah. I want to make mention, I've been noticing something with Shout Ministries, and since I've been around Shout Ministries, when I first heard it, I said, well, it's a good program and it'll last for a little while. But now I can see a passion that you have developed out of it. Your wife was in agreement with it. And that's a call of God to really find people who have struggled or people who are going through things. And because of that, you're going to interview people who went through, and then yet on the other hand, you can find the passion to bring them forth. I really can identify with where you are. You're talking about breaking the walls down. Right. And of course with Nehemiah, we're talking about building them back up. But the walls had to be broken down for Nehemiah to have a passion to see them built back up. So it's very significant when you look at the call there. I think it's very real that with you and this ministry, there's something in you that says this has got to be done. I mean, I can't give this to nobody else. I can't release this I can't take suggestions. It's what the burden that God has put on you to bring this thing to pass. And as a result, as you begin to move in that calling, you will find out, hey, I don't need the help. God is really working in me to do and be and draw to me that which I need. The call is very significant. I mean, even with Ray and his call, I mean, as I sit and listen to him, I can see how God is using him because of the burden that he has for ministry. Not just up in the pulpit, but the burden he has all the way down to the guy on the parking lot or the guy that empties the trash. I mean, that's the call. And each one of us has that. Yeah.
I want to go back just a little bit. You mentioned about when that call is on you and that burden and that burning passion inside of you and everything. I was at a point this week where I was questioning, somebody said something to me, and I think sometimes I'm quick to maybe shut it down with someone because I know what God has given me, but I guess I got to be more careful about how I express that. Not saying you don't know what you're talking about or nothing like. I wasn't saying it in that harsh a way, but it's just like I know what God has placed inside of me, you know, and it burns, so to speak.
That's right. Yeah. You know, Jeremiah said that. He said, it's like fire shut up in my bones. You know, I've got to do this. I've got to do this thing. One of the areas that, and believe it or not, I do the same thing, and I'm ready to agree with this. We go through a period of time, sometimes we just want to throw our hands up. So you said this week, well, last week, guess what? I was saying, this is it. I told my wife, I said, let's just pack up and go to Florida and retire. You know, you reach a point sometimes when you know the passion is there. All I need is just a call from somebody or somebody to say, look, I need help, and then here we go. That rises back up. It causes you to stay because it's not, the call comes not because of you, but because of what God has placed in you. Okay. So in other words, you're committed to the burden inside, if you hear me.
Yeah, I'm very understanding of that because Brenda, she can attest to the fact, my wife, that there was a couple of months ago, I was frustrated.
Yes.
I was been out of shape, and I told her on the phone, well, I ain't doing it no more. And she just kind of sat there nice and quiet and everything, and she's like, yeah, right. You know, and before the conversation was over with, we were back into what we were going to do because, you know, but when it's burning inside of it and you know God has called, well, you got two choices. You're either going to be in his will or out of his will.
That's right.
You know, and I did not want to be out of his will.
Yeah.
That's true. You know, I guess a key thing is in that process is being able to know that our ministry isn't glamorous, you know, and that even though something may look glamorous, you know, hey, wow, I get to preach in front of yada a number of people on a Sunday morning, it's really the Monday through the rest of the week that I guess where ministry hits you, you know. And sure, I mean, as a preacher, I don't think there's anything more fulfilling than being a blessing to somebody, maybe on a Sunday morning, or praying, encouraging people after you preach to something. But there's the reality that, man, it continues on. Right. And Lord, I just got to be surrendered in this thing. And that's in all areas of ministry. It's a process, but it's giving yourself over to it.
Amen. Amen. Pastor Ray, we're also talking about being sent. You know.
Right. It seems that at the end of the chapter 1, he prayed because he had to go. He had a very important job. He was a cupbearer for the king.
Right.
Very strategic job. In other words, he put his life on the line for the king. And so his prayer was, Lord, you know, my burden is so hard, and I know that I've got a tough job, but we prayed that the king's heart would be touched. And he left it alone. One thing about prayer, you've got to pray and then leave it alone. And that's exactly what he did. He prayed, and the next chapter 2, you see the king looking at him and saying, Nehemiah, your countenance is not like it has always been. Something's on your heart. Something is on your mind. That's the answer to the prayer, because he was able to say, you know, it really is. And he says, I cannot be comfortable in my position, and my brothers are with the walls down. The walls need to be brought back up for protection, for, you know, they needed to get the word solidified there, that the temple had already been built. They needed to cover that. They didn't need anybody just coming in and out. So he says, I just can't be comfortable, and I know I've got a very important job. And so it says that the king talked to his wife, and they were in agreement that we need to send you, which is a type of in ministry, Jesus sending us.
Okay.
See, in other words, he got the okay from the king. He got favor from the king. And so he just didn't say, I'll talk to you later, king, I'm out of here. But he got favor from the king. So as a result, the king sent him. And the word is very specific in that. It says the king sent him.
Right.
And he and his wife was in agreement. You need to go. How long will it take? And then he was able to say, well, I'm sure he said it wouldn't take that long. We need to get the walls back up. But the point is, you've got to be sent. Now, how does that relate to ministry? If you're going to do anything for the Lord, you've already got the call, but then who's going to give you the okay to go? And I think, as we mentioned, God not only works through the word of the Lord and works through the voice of Jesus, works through the voice of the Lord, but he also works through men who he has, where you are accountable over them. Now, he was accountable to that king.
Right.
You see, if anything came up, he was accountable to that king.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Being sent is a huge thing, because that means you're listening to what God has to say. And the key thing is, God will use the person that's your overseer to send you forth.
Right.
It's almost, in functioning as a pastor, I had people say, yeah, well, God's called me to go start a church. And it's like, okay, wow. The best way to do that is to be sent. Now, everybody don't want to hear this. I don't care whether they want to hear it or not. The best thing for you to be successful, because sometimes it's just a little more nurturing.
Right.
And you know how, I guess, Keith, it's the thing that God may give you something, but it's the concept of that, of it may be a year down the road, it may be 2, it may be 5 years. And he may want to nurture you in this process, but there's a reality when somebody's just pressing on, I've got to go do this thing. They'll learn while they go out, but it's much better to be sent. So you'll be more effective. It'll be the right timing. Usually your overseer, or those in whatever capacity, will see that it's time for you to move forward. Your pastor will see and know that, hey, my brother, sister, I really sense the urge of God to move forward. Or you'll know if you take it to your overseer and they say, wow, yes, I'm with you, I see it. Or if they say, it might be best if you, but that's that key thing where we kind of get on our own bandwagon and start pushing on off. And you'll sometimes it'll be banging your head out there a little bit learning, but eventually you will learn.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's a great thing that, like I said, being sent, because Brenda and I, we when the Lord was calling us to do shout, to step out, to launch out, as he told us, Pastor George, we went to him and one of our other pastors is no longer with us, Pastor Deborah, and we spoke with them about it beforehand, and we felt that it's time, and we had that vote of confidence, so to speak, and then for him to pray, that meant so much to Brenda and I that he brought us before the congregation.
That's right.
And prayed a prayer,
a blessing
upon us and everything,
Right, good.
and that meant a lot to us, because we knew that they felt what we were feeling, that God had, in some way, form, or fashion, gave his seal of approval. Yes, this is of me, and that's a very strong thing.
It's huge. It is.
One of the things that happened, he was going through foreign territory. He was going through different areas where he really needed to have letters from the king. In other words, I'm not out here just by myself. I've got a letter from the king, and so he was able to have basically credentials.
Right.
I see that letter as his credentials. He knew that he was going to need wood to build the gates, so he says, I need a letter for the guy in the forest. If you'll give me the letter, then he'll know that it's not just me looking for the wood to build, but I'm also looking. The king said that here's a letter from the king. Help me out. He needed a little protection, so there's a few soldiers that went with him. Basically, what I'm saying, whenever you're sent out, like you were saying, correctly, even though it may not be easy on you, you have more than enough, because there's accountability there.
Right.
You're not out there by yourself. You've got help that can come from above.
Right, man.
So it's the same with you and I. You may have, it has happened, but maybe financially, if you run into a wall. Those that sent you out sometimes will come and help you. They'll come and give you encouragement, come and lift you up. You need that. But if you're out there by yourself, I've been in ministry for a number of years, and there's pastors that have come up underneath me and, raised one that it was a long time before he took off.
Okay.
But when he did take off, it was interesting. We had a meeting one night, we were praying, and there was a brother there with us that said, Ray, you have a choice. The Lord said you have a choice. You can stay working with your dad, or you can move off. It's up to you. Whatever you feel God is saying, the Lord is saying okay to it. And that gave him release.
Okay.
Then it was God, which direction do you want me to go?
Right.
There have been others in our ministry who didn't tell me they were leaving. They just took off.
Okay.
And they tried to develop a ministry on their own. And you know what happened? They came back.
Okay.
They either crashed out or came back. And those that would come back would sit there, and then I would release them into ministry. And right today, we still talk with one another. Some have been released for 10 years, 12 years. But we still talk. I have a brother in North Carolina. He'll call me and say, Pastor, I've just got a church here, and I'm working at it, and we're doing good. Another in Atlanta, and have a brother in Ella. They call me all the time to keep me up to date with what God is doing with ministry. But there's accountability. And I have to encourage them sometimes.
That release thing is big, because once again, Brenda and I stepping out, both of us were called to Sheffield. We were called. I mean, just like you were called to the ministry,
right.
The Lord spoke to me and told me to go there.
Right.
And there was a job for me to do there. And when I got there, everything happened the way he said it would happen. Some things I was like, I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew God was in it.
That's exactly
So
right.
the thing was, when we knew God was calling us to do something, it had to be of him. We had to feel our release from the Lord,
Right.
from our responsibilities there.
Exactly.
Because otherwise we felt that we would flop,
Right.
we'd be out there, like a fish out of water, and it meant a lot to us that the Lord, we prayed and everything
Exactly.
spoke. Lord, is this what you're calling us to do? Because like I said, the release that he gave us, then the approval and the backing of our pastoral staff, that meant a lot. That was the release that we needed.
That's exactly right.
And see, the key thing is, Keith, you did things the right way.
The right way.
You went in the right. You took wise counsel. You went to your pastors. It's the right way to do things.
Right.
And some folks just get out of order and don't want to listen or hear the truth or do the right thing. And that's what it says here. Too many ministry are developed without the blessing of the king or what their overseer. Have no resources, no favor, and no direction.
Exactly.
And there's a key thing. It's almost like when God has a purpose and timing for you to go forth, then the door will just open up, and there's not anything you can do about it. When I went to my old church, basically I was telling them no. And I didn't turn in a resume. I didn't turn in an application. They just decided that you're it.
You're it.
And that's one of those things that it's just, we drove by there one time, it was Christmas time, and they had my name on the side of there. I said, I got to tell them, I'm not coming over there. I said, look, I'm not coming. And they said, well, we put you in, and everybody's agreed that you were just it. And I said, all right, Lord. But what I found out, there was so much that I learned that there was no way I could have learned unless I went out.
Right.
And so it was a blessing for me. It was huge understanding that I needed, that I didn't know that I needed. I didn't understand. And sure, there were mistakes that were made, et cetera, et cetera. But God was in the midst of the process, and it was his calling and his timing, And that's when, my goodness, nothing filled out, no paperwork on me at all. Yet the anointing of God said it's time.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. We had talked about this morning, there's a chronos time, which is chronological time.
Okay.
You've been in ministry, you've done real good, you've done what you're supposed to do, you're comfortable. That's where I was in ministry. I had a minister that I was working with. I was comfortable being the second in line. It didn't bother me. And then all of a sudden, they began to come to me and said, it's time for you to get going. And I said, I'm comfortable. I'm doing what I need to do. But meantime, the calling of God was on my life. I did have that stirring inside that I needed to go ahead and get something started. I was looking to go into a church, but the Lord put it upon my heart to pioneer a church.
Okay.
And pioneering a church was very, very difficult. But I had to get that release from them. When I got the release, I needed a place to go. Well, all of a sudden, the door opened on 27th and Truce. There's a place where you can go in an apartment building. Now that's favor, because I had no idea what I'd be doing in an apartment building, trying to develop a ministry. But God put me there, and listen, He moved us to another place. We've got land that we were given so that we could build what God wanted us to do. Favor. Favor. And now what has happened, the area has cleaned up completely, and now I'm coming back around again. There's a building that needs to be rehabbed. The brother that's the builder who's doing it came and got me. He said, you've been in this area a long time. We're going to use you to help with this. And so that was my area. That's where I needed to be. That's where God gave me favor. And everything from ministry has come out of that. Has come out of that.
So God don't need nothing from us, but we need His favor.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think, more than anything, it's the timing that God has. I mean, I can think back to being in that apartment building and going there on a Wednesday night, and there's people everywhere. It just looked unsafe.
Yeah.
But there was a love that the people developed for the church and the pastor and the people that came into church. It was a camaraderie. It's like, we're glad that you all are here.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll watch your car, Rev.
Yeah, we'll watch your car.
It's just that I was usually playing sports, and I had not been there on a Wednesday night.
Okay.
And I went in the summertime, like this time of year when school lets out for the first time on a Wednesday night, and I said, wow, here now, this is not safe. You know what I'm saying? That was 27th and Truce in its heyday.
Yeah.
Everything wrong that you wanted to find, you could find right there.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, because Sunday morning it was quiet. They were sleeping. But there was a reality in seeing that neighborhood transform.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And to see the whole negative outlook and all that just literally turn over these years.
That was probably that one thing that neighborhood needed, was that your church was
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
Exactly. And as I mentioned about the timing, there's a chronological time, and there's a Kairos time, which is God's timing. And when the call came to me, God knew where I'd be. And so His calling at that time, He said, Raymond, it's your time. And He dropped me right in that area. Now I'm looking like, how are we going to do this? But because of the call, I realized I didn't have to do it on my own. And so He began to start working in and through us to bring forth what God wanted for that area. And now I still believe that God is useful. It will be God's program in that area. I don't have to worry about anything wrong going on. It's God's plan for that area. And so we submitted to that because, again, I had the burden. I had the burden to really be a blessing and a help. We also had a burden to do ministry in a different way. The church scene, the steeples, all of that was not for me. He wanted me to be in an area where we had to agonize, and it wasn't easy. But the resources were there for us to get help, and we got the resources, and we didn't have to ask for it. It just came because of favor. And so what God did, He opened the door, and because of the call, then as I was sent, and I still have that accountability right now. Those that sent me, we meet once a week right now. We're still accountable. And as a result, the Lord is still blessing. And they are able to see the fruits of what happened because of my obedience in being able to be submitted and accountable.
The key thing about pioneering a church is just the call to God. And I think it's the reality of not waiting for this American dream to happen, because everybody's concept is, oh man, I'm going to have the next biggest church in Kansas City or the next this and that. And it's just being faithful in what God gives you.
That's right.
It's not, does the best preacher in the world have the biggest church? Maybe not. Probably not. But it's the call. I mean, imagine one of the greatest evangelists that ever lived, Billy Graham. What if he had just been confined to a church somewhere instead of doing the call that God put on his life? I mean, he was able to touch millions more by just doing what God called him to do. But it's the mindset of not getting trapped and trying to be the biggest. It's just doing what God has for you. If He wants you to go to whatever heights or depths in Him, He'll take you there. Amen. And it's not based on your goodness or how well you can preach or holler or shout or sing or anything else. It's just His timing and His purpose to bring the nucleus that He wants together.
That's good. Amen. That's good. You know, like Shout and you guys working with your ministry, the Lord, especially within the framework of the inner city, the walls are down in the inner city right now.
Okay.
They are definitely down. That's why there's so much crime. That's the reason why there's so much hatred and violence,
Jesus.
because the walls have not been built back up. And one of the things that's important is that we need to work together to realize that building the walls up is through prayer and intercession. And I want to say that because as we begin to pray and intercede, the walls then begin to be built up. I'm convinced, and I'm not fairly convinced, I'm totally convinced that when the churches in our area begin to come together as one, begin to start lifting up a standard in prayer, you'll see many, many kids in the inner city being saved and set free.
Amen.
And as they come through you, the walls will be torn down because of all the things that have gone on. But meantime, the walls have been built up that are significant for God is concerned.
That's a key thing. And when the churches come together, it's not a man-made thing. It's God ordained, and it's not nothing that has to be forced.
Right.
You'll understand that it's time for those walls to be built back up. I remember when Tony Evans came to town, he mentioned, what does this true church look like?
What does it look like?
What is this concept? You know, it's us getting beyond our differences and realizing, hey, we got to focus to pray for our city, to see victory in these streets, in the lives of those that are hurting, and see these walls
Built back up.
coming back up.
We want to thank you once again for being a part of Shout. This is a special two-part show that we're going to be doing. Next week, we're going to pick up with Nehemiah again with Pastor Ray Mabion Sr. and Pastor Ray Mabion II. We want to go deeper into this subject.